I want to start by saying what's happening right now in the Baltic Sea is far more than a regional spat. This is a move with deep repercussions, and it might just mean Putin is in far deeper trouble than many realize. Denmark has effectively cut off what many analysts call one of Russia's remaining lifelines in the Baltic Sea. They're doing so by cracking down on transit, tightening control over navigation and surveillance in the Danish Straits, and challenging the so-called shadow fleet that Moscow uses to bypass sanctions. Over the past several days, Denmark's defense and intelligence services have accused Russian naval vessels of aggressive maneuvers, sailing on collision courses, jamming navigational systems, pointing weapons at Danish helicopters and warships, and anchoring in Danish waters for extended periods. By asserting control over its straits and maritime choke points, Denmark is signaling that it won't just passively tolerate Russian provocations. That matters because the Danish Straits are the gateway between the Baltic and the North Sea, and historically, they've been a crucial corridor for Russian access to global shipping routes. What's happening here isn't just about sea lanes or naval posturing. It's a test of resolve, alliances, and maritime law. Putin's strategic options are narrowing, and Denmark's bold move is pushing Moscow into a corner. Let's break this down step by step. First, what exactly Denmark is doing. Second, why this matters for Russia. Third, the risks and possible responses. And finally, what it all means for the balance in Europe. So, what is Denmark actually doing? They're asserting tighter control over the straits that connect the Baltic to the rest of the seas. The Danish Defense Intelligence Services report repeated incidents. Russian warships navigating dangerously close to Danish naval vessels, aggressive seamanship, GPS interference, and jamming in the straits. In one case, a Russian warship remained anchored in Danish territorial waters for over a week, which suggests Moscow may be probing Danish responses. Denmark is also beefing up its maritime surveillance capabilities. It has committed major funding to build or procure dozens of new surveillance vessels and assets, including drones and sonar systems, to monitor undersea cables, pipelines, and vessel movements. They're deploying unmanned sail drones to patrol the Baltic and watch over critical underwater infrastructure. At the same time, Denmark is challenging the shadow fleet, the fleet of aging tankers that Moscow uses to funnel oil and commodities while evading sanctions. These vessels often transit through Danish waters. Copenhagen is using stricter inspection and oversight, and signaling it may no longer tolerate opaque shipping practices. These moves combined amount to Denmark converting its geography, its straits, its exclusive control over certain passages into strategic leverage. Why is this such trouble for Russia? First, Russia's access to the wider seas from the Baltic is more constrained than many imagine. The Baltic is essentially sealed by NATO and European states. To get ships and exports out, especially via oil, gas, or other trade, Moscow has for years relied on corridors that pass through narrow straits under the control or influence of neighboring countries. With Denmark tightening control, one of those corridors is under direct challenge. Second, Russia's shadow fleet is already vulnerable. These vessels are often old, poorly maintained, underinsured, and legally opaque. They rely heavily on permissive or weak oversight in choke points. By pressing in the Danish Straits, Denmark is attacking one of the few remaining weak links. If these tankers can be inspected, delayed, or blocked, the economics and logistics of sanction evasions become harder. Third, Russia's hybrid warfare gambits, sabotage of undersea cables, drone incursions, GPS jamming are now more exposed. Denmark claims Russian vessels have been jamming navigation systems and interfering with GPS. The more Denmark strengthens its maritime infrastructure and surveillance, the harder it becomes for Russia to conduct covert or deniable operations in its gray zone. Fourth, this move risks undermining Russian prestige and signaling weakness. If a relatively small country like Denmark can push back effectively, it emboldens others. It shows that Moscow's intimidation tactics might no longer go unchallenged. Finally, logistical pressure compounds with military threats. The Russian Navy has fewer uncontested sea routes, and its ability to maneuver or support operations in the Baltic, whether resupply, projection, or submarine operations, will face elevated risk. All this adds up to constraining Moscow's freedom of action, forcing it to divert resources, reassess risk, and possibly reconsider escalation. But executing this kind of pressure is not without risk. Denmark and its partners face several hazards, and Russia retains a range of possible responses. One risk is escalation. A miscalculated Russian move, a collision, an anchoring standoff, or a drone incident could provoke direct confrontation. Denmark and NATO will need to calibrate their responses carefully to avoid triggering a full-blown conflict. Another risk is legal pushback. Maritime law, treaties, and conventions protect certain transit rights. Russia might challenge Denmark's restrictions on grounds of freedom of navigation or innocent passage. Denmark must ensure its moves are defensible under international law. Russia could respond with retaliatory hybrid tactics, cyber attacks, sabotage, or disruption of undersea cables. It may resort to asymmetric warfare in the energy, communications, or information domains to punish or distract. Supply chain pressure is another option. Russia could cut off shipments to states cooperating against it, or use energy blackmail via pipelines or disruptions to retaliate economically. Military posturing is also possible, deploying more vessels, submarines, or aircraft to contest control of the Baltic, or testing NATO resolve in other theaters. Diplomatically, Moscow can appeal to neutral countries or international bodies accusing Denmark of aggression or overreach. It may seek to split alliances or sow division among NATO members, and perhaps most dangerously, covert operations. Russia might use the shadow fleet itself for sabotage, deliberately causing accidents, environmental incidents, or infrastructure damage that can be blamed on accidents. Or it might intensify drone or underwater sabotage attempts on cables or strategic infrastructure. Denmark and its allies will need to balance firmness with caution, ensuring they do not play into escalation while maintaining credible deterrence. So what consequences might play out in the weeks and months ahead? Denmark's move could embolden other Baltic states. Sweden is already increasing maritime surveillance. NATO may strengthen its naval presence in the region. The Baltic Sea could become a more contested front in Europe's security landscape. Russia may respond by rerouting or constricting its shadow fleet operations, raising costs and complexity. The shadow fleet may shrink or operate more clandestinely, with longer routes, more false flags, or riskier behavior. Hybrid warfare may intensify. Cable cuts, drone incursions, cyber attacks, these tools may become Moscow's preferred instruments in response to its reduced conventional options. Political pressure within Europe may increase. Nations might demand stronger coordination on naval security, energy diversification, and undersea infrastructure protection. Delicate alliances could face strain over how aggressively to confront Russia. Over time, this shift could erode some of Russia's strategic leverage in the Baltic. Denial of safe maritime corridors limits its ability to support operations, threatening its naval access and trade routes. From a broader perspective, the move signals that peripheral states are no longer passive bystanders. They're asserting strategic agency. It challenges the notion that Russia can continue aggressive moves with impunity. In summary, Denmark's decision to cut off Russia's lifeline in the Baltic is far more than symbolic. It's a realignment of control over key maritime choke points, a challenge to Moscow's ability to run its shadow fleet, and a test of whether geopolitical pressure can suddenly narrow Putin's room to maneuver. Yes, Denmark is smaller, but sometimes geography, resolve, and alliances matter more than brute size. Putin may find that the harder edge of sanctions and diplomacy now meets a steel wall in the Baltic. Whether Russia backs down, escalates, or pivots to new tactics remains to be seen. But for now, Putin is in big trouble not because of a single loss, but because one of his pathways to power is being strangled before his eyes. If you found this breakdown useful, drop a like. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Russia will retaliate broadly, or will this force a recalibration? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives.